So far, we have been exploring consonants and vowels in detail. In other words, we have been learning the science of pronunciation in an academic way. However, some of you might be here for more practical reasons. You might only be interested in improving your pronunciation without wanting to understand the difficult concepts behind it. If that is you, then from this episode onwards, I will give you practical advice and information which will help to enhance the quality of your pronunciation. In this episode, I will discuss all of the difficult sounds for most learners of English and give you advice on how to improve your pronunciation of these sounds. So let's get started. Let's use Standard Chinese as an example throughout this episode, as it has the most native speakers of any language in the world, and it also has the most English learners of any language in the world. Overall, English and Chinese share many of the same sounds. However, Chinese has some sounds which do not exist in English. For example, two consonants which don't exist in English are the first sound in the Chinese characters
日
and.
小
You can see the IPA for these two sounds on the screen. In terms of vowels, for example, the first sound in the Chinese character
语
and the only sound in the Chinese character whose IPA you can see on the screen don't exist in English. It is also true that English has several sounds which Standard Chinese doesn't have. These sounds are usually more difficult for Chinese learners of English, so you must practice these sounds carefully. These sounds are the topic of this episode. Before we look at these sounds, let's return to a concept we learned about in episode 1, phonemes. We said that a sound is a phoneme if, when you change the phoneme in a word becomes a different word. For example, if I change the sound n in need to all, then the word becomes lead. Lead is a different word from need, so these two sounds are phonemes. All of the sounds in episode 2, except vowel number 12, are phonemes. However, not every sound that we use when we speak is a phoneme. A sound is not a phoneme if, when you change the sound, the word is still the same word. The first difficult sound that we will learn about is called the glottal plosive. You can see the IPA symbol for this on the screen. To make this sound, we must quickly stop the airflow in our throat. Do you remember we learned that the difference between voiced and voiceless sounds is that two doors in your throat almost close to make voiced sounds, but are open to make voiceless sounds? Well, these two doors completely close and then reopen in order to make the glottal plosive. When we speak quickly, we can use this sound instead of t. However, it is impossible to say this sound on its own, and it is also never at the beginning of a word, only in the middle or at the end. It also sounds strange when we use this sound in one word on its own. However, if we have a long, flowing conversation and we are speaking naturally, then we will probably use this sound many times, and it will make your pronunciation more natural and more efficient. Here are some example sentences. In the words cat, football, and bottle, I will firstly use t, and secondly use the glottal plosive. There is a cat over there. There is a cat over there. Let's play football on the grass. Let's play football on the grass. He stole my bottle. He stole my bottle. Most of the time we say, for example, cat. However, if we are speaking quickly, we might say cat. Do you think the glottal plosive is a phoneme? If you said no, then you are correct, because cat and cat are the same word. Therefore, this sound cannot change a word into another word. I'd now like you to say these 3 sentences. Firstly with t, secondly with the glottal plosive. Make sure you can hear the difference between the glottal plosive and t. Pause the video until you have finished. Before we move on to the next difficult sound, there is one more common sound in English which isn't a phoneme. It is the vowel a. It is in fact the most common vowel in English. It is the vowel in the first syllable of about, and the vowel in the final syllable of water. We will learn about this in detail in Chapter 2, Episode 5. However, for now, you should know that this sound is not the same as a, whereas the full vowel is used in stressed syllables. The vowel is only used in unstressed syllables. If you return to episode 8, you will see that these 2 vowels are in different places on the vowel trapezium for British English, so they are slightly different sounds. The schwa is very central because this is the most relaxed tongue position. We know that it isn't a phoneme because, if we stress a syllable with a, then the word doesn't become a different word. For example, water, water. You can see the IPA for these 2 pronunciations on the screen. The vowels at the end are different, but the word is the same. So, in conclusion, the glottal plosive and the schwa are 2 common English sounds, but they are not phonemes. So, we must learn where and how to say them accurately. The next difficult sounds we will discuss are th and v. As we learned in episode 3, these are dental sounds. Th is voiceless and v is voiced. This type of sound does not exist in many languages, such as Chinese, and so these cause problems for many learners of English. Regarding the voiceless form, learners often say f or s instead of f. So, sometimes it is common to hear thank you or sank you. And regarding the voiced form, instead of a word like this, it is common to hear this or zis. It can take some learners a long time to be able to accurately say th and v. To practice th and v, put the tip of your tongue between your teeth and then blow air out of your mouth. I recommend that you exaggerate this when you practice making this sound. Therefore, at the beginning, stick your tongue quite far out of your mouth and then blow air out. I recommend that you use a mirror to make sure that you can see the front part of your tongue when you practice these sounds. However, in normal speech, the front part of your tongue should only be slightly between your teeth. Let's practice these sounds together. I would like you to say th 4 times and then say thanks. I will demonstrate this first. Th, 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 thanks. I would also like you to do this for th and that. Th, 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 that. Okay, it's now your turn. Pause the video while you do this. Finally, I will say some minimal pairs. Afterwards, please say them yourself. Pause the video while you do this. First, thirst. Free, 3. Mouse, mouth. Day, they. Wordy, worthy. Fred, thread. Doze, those. The next 2 sounds we will discuss are r and l. These sounds are very similar, so it is very common for learners of English to mix them up. Therefore, it's common to hear practice instead of practice, elect instead of erect, and please instead of please. Even though these sounds are very similar, your tongue is actually in a slightly different place. To say ul, your tongue must touch the inside of your mouth. It is the same place as t and d. For r, your tongue curls backwards slightly. If you think you mix up r and ul, then be careful when you say these sounds. I will now say some minimal pairs, or in this case, minimal triplets. Afterwards, please say them yourself. Pause the video while you do this. Wed, red, lead. Weed, read, lead. Wait, rate, late. Wise, rise, lies. Wife, rife, life. Wing, ring, ling. Way, ray, lay. Finally, let's discuss the difficult vowels in English. English has 3 pairs of very similar vowels. Because they are very similar, it is very important for you to make sure that each vowel sounds different. Let's start with E and I. Learners of English often have problems with I. It is perhaps the hardest English vowel for Chinese learners because it doesn't exist in Chinese. Therefore, I have some advice for you. Even though the position is very similar to E, they are different vowels. E is not a longer version of I. Actually, I is slightly lower, so the mouth is slightly more open. Therefore, I recommend that you say these 2 vowels together several times, like this. E-I, 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 E-I. Hopefully, you can feel that your mouth opens slightly more for I. The second pair of vowels that can cause difficulties for learners is E and a. The difference between these two vowels is that the mouth is more open for a. You can feel this if you repeat a, 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 a. Finally, o and or could also be a problem for some learners. For example, Chinese doesn't have o, so many learners say a short or instead. Remember that o is low, so the mouth is slightly more open and the lips are only slightly rounded. However, the mouth is slightly more closed for or, and the lips are also more rounded. If you say these vowels together several times, you will feel the difference. To practice these, I would like you to say each pair of vowels several times. I will say them first. When you say them, make sure you can feel that each vowel is in a slightly different position. I, 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 I. E, a, e, a, e, a. O, 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 o. This is the end of episode 10, and also the end of chapter 1. In the next chapter, we will leave accuracy behind and learn about the next component of native-like pronunciation, fluency. Thanks for watching.